To my younger self. Pain. It's not a terrible thing. In many ways, pain is a teacher, but you have to choose to be a good student. You'll think you're alone. You're never alone. You'll want to say you're fine. You're not fine. Life is hard, but you can do hard. Learn from it. Just like a current under the surface, that pain will make waves. You'll talk it out with people who care about you, or you'll take it out on the people you care about. Again, choose. Choose to take it seriously. Choose to talk about it. Choose to learn from it. And when you do, you're choosing to be better for it.
Happy to be with you this weekend. My name is Jeremiah. I'm one of the pastors here, and we are in week 2 of a series called Letters to My Younger Self. This is a wisdom series. This is one of those times when we stop and we say, what does the Bible have that, Christian or not a Christian, would make your life better and would make you better at life? And we're going and we're picking through some pieces of wisdom. And wisdom is a treasure, and wisdom is good, and wisdom is something that we should seek after, and wisdom has a win to it. And I want to start out here just in your notes. Let's go ahead and begin. The win of wisdom is this, that we have the opportunity when we gain wisdom to be able to learn it today so that I can apply it when that time comes, and then I won't have to regret it. Instead of waiting until the time when the crash happens or the hard knock happens or the confusion happens and then we trial and error and we get it wrong and we have to learn from it, instead wisdom gives us the chance to say, learn it so that I can apply it and then I won't have to regret it. And we've been going through this wisdom series through the lens of letters to my younger self. What would you say to your younger self if you had the chance to go back, say, let me save you some pain? Let me save you some tears. Let me save you some hardship. In fact, let me tell you some things to get the best and the most out of life. What would you want to tell your younger self? When I think about my younger self, when I think about youth in general, one of the things that's just true of us when we're young is this, that when we're young, we are full of potential. Man, you look at a kid 7 years old, the world is that kid's oyster. Everything is a possibility, and they innocently believe so much in just their own capacity for greatness. That's why I as a kid, we didn't want to, work in accounts receivable. We wanted to work in outer space. Like we wanted, and if we were going to be a teacher, we were going to be the best teacher. And if we were going to be a policeman, we were going to save the world. And no matter what we were going to do, we just believed in our capacity and in our potential to be great at it. And that's one of those beautiful things about youth that you just want to bottle up and you just want to protect and you just want to save that forever. Today, the thing that we're going to talk about is actually one of the greatest threats to that beautiful potential that we start with in life. I was spending some time with my 9-year-old. I have a 9-year-old son, and I was inviting him to come down. We have a little basement, kind of a basement gym, and so I was going to go down, do a little working out, invited him to come down, and I mean, before we were even downstairs, like he was already planning his bodybuilding career. Like he was like, thinking about all the ways that he was going to be awesome at this. And then, we go down and I start teaching him a little bit about, okay, here's how you do a push-up. No, get your butt down. No, it's not this, it's more, you got to, and he got it right. And he did about 10 push-ups and I was proud of him and he went upstairs and then a couple days later, he comes out of his room like this. Like, Dad, what's going on? What is this? Son, that's pain. I hate it. Why did this happen to me? Well, because you did push-ups. Oh, what can I do to make it go away? Do more push-ups? Don't worry, son, if you go back to the gym, you'll get used to pain. It's hard to have that conversation with a 9-year-old. But here's what happened in him. He was going along. He had dreams. He knew his potential. He went for it. Pain hit him. And when pain hits you, in that place where there's nothing but potential, pain changes you. Pain changed my 9-year-old from being a kid who believed in his bodybuilding career to I can't get him to come to the basement gym anymore. Pain changes that little girl who thought she was Snow White and every animal was just going to come perch on her shoulder and everything was great. And then one day she finds out dogs bite. Now she's scared of animals. That kid who believes friends don't lie and people you can trust and you're going to be okay. And then that pain hits and it changes them and then they begin to have trust issues and problems with that. Pain changes us. And what started with potential, pain threatens. And the greater the pain and the more the pain, the greater the threat. And here's the threat when pain enters the equation. Pain has the potential to squash your potential. Pain has the potential to squash your potential. You believe in the potential of this marriage and in your ability to be great in this marriage. But in the last marriage, because of the way you were mistreated and the trust issues that you bring forward into that, you actually are having a hard time being great in this marriage. Why? Because pain has the potential to squash your potential. You were brave once and you took risks and you took a risk in your business and it fell flat and it hurt and you lost a lot of money. And today you're looking at an opportunity and you're going, man, if I take this risk, there's so much to be gained, but I can't put myself through that again. So I'll settle for where I am instead. You want to love people well, but you were molested and you've got troubles trusting people, and you've got bitterness, and you've got anger, and if you admit it to yourself, you've got hate, and the problem is you want to love people well, but you're not loving people well because that pain has squashed potential. And parts of the world that were open to you aren't open to you, and things that were options for you aren't options for you, and things that were within reach aren't within reach anymore. Pain is all along the spectrum for this, from the stuff that we might call little things to the stuff that we might call big things. At its biggest, it's called trauma. And trauma literally means wound. And when you're walking around with trauma, here's the definition I just want us to understand. Trauma is significant wounds from our experiences that have lasting adverse effects on our ability to function physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, socially. And when pain is not dealt with properly, pain has the power to squash your potential. Pain has the power to keep you from bringing your best self to the things that matter most in life. It's getting fun, isn't it? When Pastor Keith told me, hey, Jeremiah, you're going to be preaching soon. Great. It's going to be in this series, Letters to My Younger Self. Great. It's going to be all about pain. Great. A couple disclaimers I just want to say before we move any further here in this. I know that pain comes in all shapes and sizes. And I know that I'm not able to stand up here and say that I'm an expert on any of those things. I also know that everybody processes pain differently, and there might be a thing you're going through and somebody else is going through, and the truth is you're going through them very differently. I also know I'm not a professional counselor, I'm a pastor, and that my approach to this is probably not going to be maybe specifically the thing that you would hear if you were sitting on a couch across from a professional counselor. But I think they're generally the things that we all need to hear from the wisdom that comes from the Bible for us. And my goal in this message is not that this would be heavy, although it's going to feel heavy at times, but my goal is that you would not remember this as something that was heavy, but that you would remember it as something that was helpful and something that was hopeful. And if you are looking in this message for the thing that you go, well, he said that thing wrong, or that didn't really hit me right, you'll probably find some stuff like that. But if you would change your posture and instead say, I'm going to look for the things that do land with me. I'm going to look for the things that can help me. I think you're going to find some of those as well. And I think there's some real hope for us as we continue. Pain has the potential to squash your potential. But I want to hone in on that word. Pain has the potential, which means it's possible, which also means it's possible not to. And there's a way to be able to handle pain and process pain and think about pain in a way that doesn't squash your potential, that doesn't limit you, that doesn't hold you back. But it all comes down to the question on what do I do with my pain? See, you didn't choose your pain, but your pain chose you. But when it chose you, it gave you a choice. And as we think about the ways that people deal with pain, we have a few different choices. The first one is this: when you think about what am I going to do with my pain, here's an option. You could dismiss it, and a lot of people do that. Dismiss it. Fake it. Stuff it. Lie. Pretend. There are Christian versions of this where we feel like I kind of owe it to God because I'm supposed to help make God look good, so I can't really show that things are awful in my life if God's supposed to look good. So as a Christian, am I even allowed to show pain? And sometimes our answer to that is we tell ourselves no, and we just slap on a smile and we just lie and we dismiss it. Another thing that we can do is we can say, well, I'm going to be defined by it. I'm not going to dismiss it and fake it and lie. I'm going all in on this thing. And instead of saying, man, because of my pain, there's like a part of the world that's shut down to me, we say, no, and because of my pain, I'm going all in on this one part. We talk about it all the time. We lead with it in every conversation. We continually live from that place. And instead of saying, this became a part of my story, we say, now my story is about this. We become defined by it. What I want to say is to dismiss pain, to be defined by pain, neither of those lead to healthy places because they're both versions of living a lie. The one is living a lie by saying, this isn't real, it's not a part of my life. The other is living a lie by saying, this is now my life. And here's what we know. You can't have healthy relationships. You can't connect to God well. You can't connect to other people well if you're living a lie. And so, the third thing that we realize is an option is that here's the third choice we could make. We could deal with it. Deal with it. You have to deal with it to heal from it. I've heard that trauma that's not treated is trauma that's transferred. If you don't deal with it, here's what happens. You'll talk it out with people who care about you, or you'll take it out on people that you care about. And your potential for healthy relationships and your potential for a full life is that you would deal with it. But it's more than just healthy relationships. It's more than just a full life. It's more than just being a great mom or a great husband or a great friend or a great worker, because for the Christian, there's even more at stake. For the Christian, the reason why we need to deal with our pain so that it won't have the power to squash our potential. The reason we have to deal with it is because we're called to something even more. We're called to represent Jesus to a world that's looking for hope. And that is a potential that we do not want held back. We do not want squashed. We do not want stuffed. And so it's so imperative that we realize how to properly deal with our pain. And so if I were writing a letter to my younger self, I would probably say some version of, I wish I could tell you you're not going to have pain in this life, but you are. But here's what I want to tell you. When you encounter your pain, you have to process your pain. You have to process your pain. People look back at where their life blew up. They retrace their steps to go, man, this is the time in life when things went bad, or these are the relationships that were caught in the wake of that thing. This is the carnage that happened at that time. They can usually trace it back to a time where they said, I didn't properly process my pain. And if we could say to our younger selves, let me just give you one thing that's going to help you make it through this life. You have to learn how to process your pain. And what we're going to see today is that there is a biblical way to do this, a way that is full of hope, a way that no matter what pain you're facing, you can apply this, a way that can lead to health and potential and a fullness of life. And when we think about an example of somebody who could be a great person to look at as somebody who processed pain well, I'm going to say the name in a minute, but give you guys a few kind of breadcrumbs to who it might be. This is somebody that probably, when we think of like, who's somebody in the Bible that you'd like to be like? Who's somebody that you would want to pattern your life around? We go, this guy probably makes the top 5 list for most people who are Christians, maybe even the top 3 list for most people who are Christians. This is a person who, man, out of his heart came song after song, poem after poem about God's goodness and about God's greatness and majesty and God as creator. This is a person that God said, this is a man after my own heart. And now maybe some of us are thinking, oh, I know who it is. But it's King David. And King David isn't just a person that wrote psalms and had a great relationship with God. King David is a person we look at today because he experienced a tremendous amount of pain and trauma in his life. And he wrote down what it was like to go through it. When we think about kind of David's resume of pain and trauma, let me just kind of open up the pain file here real quick and put in front of us a little bit of what he experienced. All right, so he grew up as a shepherd, overlooked by his brothers when it was time to choose a king. He got a harp gig working for Saul, and so he got to play harp for the king, which was great for a little while until the time came when David had this brilliant and brave idea. Well, nobody's going up against this Philistine Goliath. I guess I'll do it. And so with the Spirit of God on him, David steps up, kills Goliath, and instead of being hailed as a hero by his boss, Saul is jealous, tries to kill David. So now David has been the subject of an attempted murder. He goes through the next several years of his life with a target on his back. Saul's after him. He's always looking over his shoulder. He never feels safe anywhere. Always on the run and at risk. Then he's made king. Now he's a political figure, the job none of us would want. Your reputation is constantly being written by the narratives of people who don't even know you, but they just want to say stuff about you. Every day, his reputation's just on fire and he can't do anything about it. And he says, people say stuff about me that they don't even understand, and they mock me and they hate me. Then it got worse. David made some really bad choices. Got involved in an affair, and to cover up the affair, ordered the murder of this lady's husband. So now he's double guilty. He's got blood on his hands, and he realizes that. He's processing deep guilt connected to that. And then a person comes up and they go, we know you did it. Shame, embarrassment, regret, and all of the pain that comes along with that in the midst of trying to kind of reconcile and repent and restore from that. He's got a baby dying. He's praying to God and he's saying, please, please save my baby's life. And the baby's life is not saved, and the baby dies. Now he's lost a child. He moves on from there. Completely dysfunctional family moving forward. Rape in the family, murder in the family, and he feels the fault and the guilt for all of these things. And then his own son tries to kill him. Tons of trauma in this guy's life. And yet here we are, and we're going, man, if I could be like anybody, top 3, I'd want to be like David. What was it about the way that he processed all of that pain that allowed him to still be a person that God said, that's a man after my own heart, that allowed him to still be a person who was so healthy and full of life and achieved such great potential? And if he were writing a letter to his younger self, what might it look like? We're going to look right now at a psalm of how he processed pain and a pattern that we can learn for being able to appropriately process pain that would lead to greater life and fewer regrets. We're going to go to Psalm 61. And if you're a person who takes notes and looks at the Bible on your phone, I just want to warn you, we're kind of going back and forth, doing both a bunch of times. So good luck. David starts with this as we see how he processes pain. He says, hear my cry, O God. Listen to my prayer. So one of the first things that he said we see is he starts with God. And he doesn't start with God going, I got to pretty this up, I got to make it okay. He says, I'm actually going to take my crying, my weeping, my mourning, my ugly right to you, God. Listen to my prayer. From the ends of the earth, I call to you. Now, we know that David didn't actually travel super far, spent most of his life in what we call the Promised Land. So he didn't really geographically go to the ends of the earth. What he's really saying here is he says, I feel estranged. I feel isolated. God, I feel like I'm a world away from you. I feel like I'm a world away from where I need to be or anybody who understands me. I feel distant and alienated and alone. He says, I call as my heart grows faint. Have you ever had such a pain or such a distress and you feel like my heart's about to give out? I don't know if I can take it anymore. I'm completely overwhelmed. David is saying, I cry to you, God. I feel so alone and abandoned. I feel isolated and I am overwhelmed and I'm depressed and I'm discouraged and I don't even know if I can handle it here. And if we're looking for a pattern for how David processes his pain, the first thing that we see that he does is this. He acknowledges his hurt. And so for you, letter to my younger self, first thing to do, listen, acknowledge your hurt. Acknowledge your hurt. Be honest. Be honest. Say, I'm wounded. Say, I'm not okay. Don't pretend that you're okay. Because the first step in healing is calling out what needs to be healed. I remember when our kids were really little. I mean really little, before they could talk or anything like that. It was so hard to determine, why are they crying? Like, it would be so much easier if they could just say it to us. I remember one time we had a kid who was crying in bed and we couldn't figure it out. She totally looked like she was in distress. Found a little string that was wrapped around her little toe. It was cutting off the blood circulation. Took forever to find that. It was so frustrating. If she could have just said it, we could have begun the healing process. Listen, it's not inability to speak that keeps you from saying it and starting the healing process. It's other things. It's shame. It's believing that, like, this shouldn't hurt this bad. What's my problem? Other people seem stronger. Why am I not stronger? It's a belief that people won't understand. It's a belief that somehow I'm betraying God by saying out loud that things are hard and so I must be a bad Christian. It's putting on yourself the weight to be strong for other people, so I'm not going to deal with what's going on with me. And because of these things, the church is full of hurting people who are too afraid to acknowledge their hurt. Here's why that's a problem. Your pain is going to speak. Your pain is going to speak. It's either going to come through your mouth, or it's going to come through your broken relationships, or it's going to come from your unhealthy patterns, or it's going to come from the addictions and the things that you do to cover it. But your pain is going to find a voice. And anybody who tells you that it is wrong or weak or unspiritual to say out loud that you are hurting is wrong and is missing it, because that's right where David started. He said, I'm going to start with acknowledging my hurt. And I'm going to say it out loud. Name it. I feel left out because I didn't get a date to prom. And that hurts. We found out we can't have kids. And our dreams of what the future would be like are crumbling before us. My husband walked out on me and the kids, and I'm so scared. I don't know what we're going to do. I'm watching my mom die, and I can't stop it, and it's killing me. I hurt someone, and I regret it, and I would do anything to take it back, but I can't. I didn't get the job. My dog died. Say it. Say it. Name it. Acknowledge your hurt. Why? Why did David acknowledge his hurt? Because pain has the potential to squash your potential. And in order to keep that from happening, you have to process your pain the right way. And the first step in the process is you have to acknowledge your hurt. And then David moves on and we see what he does next. Let's go back to Psalm 61. And he says to God, lead me. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. He says, I need some things right now. I need a rock. I need a firm foundation under my feet. He says, I need a rock that's higher than where I am right now. I need to go to a better place. And he says, I need someone who can get me there. So inherent in him saying, lead me, he's saying to God, and I will take the steps to follow. I need you, God, to help me get to a place that I can't reach by myself because I can't stay here where I am. And I need help. And look at what he says next. For you have been my refuge, a strong tower against the foe. I long to dwell in your tent forever and take refuge in the shelter of your wings. He says, historically, I've done this before. When I've needed something, I've come to you. I've asked for help, and you've shown up for me, and you've been strong for me, and you've been protection, and you've been refuge, and you've been shelter. And I need that right now. I need to feel close to you. I need to feel comforted by you. I need to feel protected by you. And so I'm asking for you to be my tower and my refuge and my shelter because I need help. The second thing that we see that David does in this passage that we can do if we're going to process our pain is embrace the help. Embrace the help. He says, I can't stay where I'm at, but I can't get to a better place without help. So God, lead me. It's so baffling to me why sometimes this is such a roadblock for many of us. When our car is having problems, we say, man, my car's not acting right. I don't know what to do, or I don't know how to do it, or I don't have the tools to do it. There's a car shop down the road. They can help with cars. I'm going to take my car to the car shop, and then they can fix my car, and then my car won't be acting bad anymore. And that's fine when it comes to cars. But when our heart's not working right, when our heart is failing and having trouble, we go, man, I should be stronger. I should be more spiritual. I should be smarter. Instead of saying, there's help, I should reach out and get it. I should reach out and connect to it. We believe the lies that to reach out for help means you must be weak, you must be unspiritual, you must be dumb, you must be unable. You know what? David said the strong, spiritual, smart, courageous thing to do is to go, lead me. I need help to get to a better place. That shows up in a lot of ways. The first place David went, the first place we go is to Jesus. We go to God and we say, this is how it is and I need help. The Holy Spirit is called the helper. And we go to God first, but here's what we know. God has created people and God has created professionals who can help us. God has created counselors and therapists and doctors and friends who won't stop calling you, bugging you to go out to coffee and talk to them, and parents and grace group leaders and mentors. And he's put those people in your life and he said, this is your help. Lean into it. And the cool thing about being a Christian is we don't have to choose between like Jesus or therapy. We get to go like, you know what, I'll take both. Jesus or medicine, you know what, I'll take both. Jesus or that friend who's going to be there for you. And he says, take both because those are helps that he has put in our life. And when we say I'm going to embrace the help, guys, this is scalable. Maybe the thing you need is a Bible reading plan and a friend who's going to go through that with you and ask you the conversations and help you get over the bump in the road. But maybe what you need is the next 10 years of your life figuring out how you're going to develop the skills and the tools to be able to unpack this and move forward. This is scalable. But David said the spiritual, smart, courageous, right thing to do is embrace the help. If you're going to process your pain, you got to embrace the help. The next thing David does as he continues here, and we see this. He says, for you, God, have heard my vows. You've given me a heritage of those who fear your name. He says, I'm going to reflect for a second on the history we have together, me and you, God. You've always heard my prayers. I'm in pain. I'm in a really hard place, but you have always heard my prayers. And you know what else you've done? You've counted me among the group of people who fear your name, who hope in you. And so he says, so I'm going to hope in you. because you've always let me do that. You've always heard my prayers. We've got good history together. You've been faithful in the past, so I'm going to believe that you're going to be faithful in the future. And look what he does as he thinks about hope for the future. Look at the bold prayer. Even from the place of pain, he begins to pray. Increase the days of the king's life. He's talking about himself. He's the king. Increase the days of the king's life, his years for many generations. Right now, here's what he's not saying. This sucks. I'm over it. I don't think I can do this anymore. I'm just going to mail it in until I can retire from this and be done with it. He's like, no, I still believe my better days are ahead. Even though I'm in this mess and in this pain, God, increase the days of the king's life, his years for many generations. Look what else he prays. May he be enthroned in God's presence forever. Appoint your love and faithfulness to protect him. He says, I may be in pain, and that might go away, and another one might come because my circumstances change. But here's what doesn't change, and here's what I put my hope in. Your presence, your love, your faithfulness are always there for me. They've been there for me in the past. They're going to be there for me in the future. And the thing that David wants to show us as we move forward in how to process your pain is this. Here's what you have to do. You have to remember your hope. Remember your hope. David rehearses the faithfulness of God to himself over and over and over. He says, God's been faithful, he will be faithful. I have a friend in my grace group that I am deeply challenged by. He's been going through a really hard time these last several months. We got to walk him through the death of a sister just a couple months ago. And now he's got another sister who's taken really ill and has encountered some tremendous health concerns, and he's bringing her into his home, him, his wife, their 4 young boys, and bringing his sister in. He's carried pain watching his wife suffer through physical pain and not being able to do anything about that. And over the touch points of Monday nights at our house at Grace Group, over and over, I've probably heard 4 times from him a statement like this. He'll sit on the couch and he'll say, this pain doesn't change that God is good and faithful, because God's goodness and faithfulness aren't rooted in my circumstances. They're rooted in his character, and his character doesn't change. He's good. He's good. He's good. He's good. We're like, bro, wow. He rehearses the goodness and the faithfulness of God to himself consistently because he has to. Because that's how we remember our hope. And he would say to you, things are blowing up in my life, and I remember that God is good. Things are really hard right now, and I remember that God is faithful. And that's what David did. You may not understand how these two things fit together, but they always fit together, your pain and God's faithfulness. Your pain and God's goodness. My mom neglected me, and she wasn't there for me, and I remember God's presence is with me always. My spouse walked out on me, and he was unfaithful to me, and I remember that God's faithfulness is with me, and he will never leave me, and he will never forsake me. The person I counted on discriminated against me, and they were unloving to me. And I remember that God loves me, and he will never stop loving me. You have to rehearse the goodness of God. You have to remember your hope. He's been faithful before. He'll be faithful again. You have to process your pain, and part of that is to remember your hope. Let's look at what David does next. He finishes Psalm 61 with this. He says, then I will ever sing in praise of your name and fulfill my vows day after day. He says, in light of all this, here's the thing that I will do. He doesn't say, I might. He doesn't say, if I feel like it. He says, I will sing in praise of your name. I am going to choose that I will worship you and that I will continue to serve you. Literally, I'm going to sing. I know sometimes you come to church and when things are really hard, that's the last thing you feel like doing. David would step right in here and he would go, I'm going to sing right through my pain. And I'm going to sing loud, and I'm going to make a choice that I'm going to worship God, and I'm going to fulfill my vows. I'm going to keep on doing the things, God, that I've told you that I'm going to do. I'm going to give. I'm going to pray. I'm going to serve. I'm going to tell my neighbor about Jesus. I'm going to be good to my kids. I'm going to keep on keeping on and serving you and doing the things you've put here to do. The last thing that we see that we can do as part of this processing our pain is worship the Holy One. Worship the Holy One. David says, whether I'm healed or whether I'm still healing, I will worship you. Whether I'm healed or whether I am still healing, I will worship you. In the midst of my hurt, I worship you. I've been in some unique places and gotten to be a part of some really special worship circles. Gotten to be in a prison, worshiping with inmates. Gotten to be in an orphanage, worshiping with little kids who've lost their parents. Gotten to be around the bedside of a man who was dying. Friends and family gathered around and we sang worship songs. Gotten to be in a space where a dear friend had just found out that she had cancer. And the power of worship in those spaces transports us from saying like, this is a gathering around death, to saying this is a gathering around the holiness of God. This is a gathering around cancer. No, this is a gathering around the faithfulness of God. And what worship does is it transforms and it transports those moments. Worship is incredibly healing because when you worship in your pain, what your worship is saying is, I am not defined by this event in my life. I am defined by God. Your worship says that betrayal, that loss of a child, that cancer, that is a significant experience. But the most significant experience in my life is my experience of Jesus and his love for me. And worship is saying, I center my life on Jesus and not on my pain. So whether I am healed or whether I am still healing, I will be praising and serving God because listen, that pain is a part of my story. But that pain is not what my story is about. My story is about God, and I will worship him, and I will love him, and I will worship the Holy One. To process your pain in your hurt. Acknowledge your hurt. Embrace the help. Remember your hope. Worship the Holy One. All through this talk, there have just been these kind of nuggets of what we would call the gospel. Every time we've said the goodness of God. Every time we've said the faithfulness of God. Every time we've said the love of God. Those are like nuggets or gems kind of along the way. But what I want to do is just kind of gather all those up right now and just to say, we've talked about the potential of pain. Let's talk about the potential of the gospel for just a minute. The gospel. The idea that God created a perfect world that was absolutely free from pain. That man in our sin chose sin, introduced pain and hurt and death, and that God's response to that was to say, I'm going to send my perfect son into your imperfection. And Jesus came, and he experienced the fullest extent of human pain. Torture, betrayal, misunderstanding, mockery, abandonment, all of it. All the way until the end. And Jesus died for the very sins that cause our pain. And in Jesus dying, he created a place, a way for us to be able to know God and to have a home that is going to be free from pain in the future. And then that very power that raised Jesus from the grave is the power that lives in every single Christian. And so when we think about the gospel applied to your pain, here's the hope that I want us to land on today. The gospel applied to your pain is two things. Number one, it is the power for your growth. The gospel applied to your pain is the power for your growth. Why? Because the gospel says you can heal. The gospel says you can renew your mind. The gospel says you can have the strength to take those hard steps. The gospel says you can be better for it at the end. The gospel says if the cross says you're victorious in Jesus, no experience in your life gets to say otherwise. The gospel is the power for your growth. And the gospel is the promise for God's glory. Why? Because the gospel says what they meant for evil, God can use for good. The gospel says that all things work together for those who love him. The gospel says not only is this something that God can free you from, but this is something that God can use you in. The gospel applied to your pain is the power for your growth and the promise for God's glory. It doesn't just highlight a healthy person when we process our pain right. It highlights a holy God. Right? That's why we looked at David in the first place. We opened up Psalm 61. We didn't just see a healthy person when we read the story of how he processed pain. We walked away seeing a holy God. Can I ask you something? If somebody watches how you process pain, will they see a healthy person? Will they see a holy God? And so what I want us to just ask ourselves this weekend is this question as we think about the gospel and our growth and God's glory is this question. For my growth and God's glory, I need to process fill in the blank. For my growth and God's glory, I need to process what? What is the thing that if in your pain you would choose to say, I'm going to process it the way that David processed it? That it would lead to people seeing not just a person who's healthy, but a God who is holy. For my growth in God's glory, I need to process what? Answer that, pray about it, take it to God, that's the first step, and then work the process. I've got scars on my body, not a ton of them, but a few. Got a chickenpox scar up here on my forehead. Me and a guy named Barry, when we were playing soccer, we both went for a headbutt at the same time. Both of us had to get stitches. I was going under a barbed wire fence when I was a kid. Caught it right on the back there, so I have a little scar there. Had an arm surgery last year, and then I got something on my knee. I don't even know what it came from. You've got scars too. Here's what I know. Every scar kind of tells a story, doesn't it? We remember things about that, but scars aren't just physical. We have emotional scars too. And in every scar, there is a story. But the most important, the most compelling, the most determining part of that story is not how that pain came to you, but how you chose to process that pain. That's the thing that's going to determine whether that pain is going to leave you squashed and stuck and falling short of your potential, whether you're going to be free and reaching your potential and living in the fullness that God has for you. If I were to write a letter to my younger self, I would say, Jeremiah, you're not going to get through life without some scars. But the gospel says, your pain does not have to hold you back from your potential. There is help in your hurting. There is hope in your healing. There is a proper way to process pain that can lead to your growth and God's glory. Let's pray. God, as we think about these things, I'm grateful that I'm not praying to a God who is unfamiliar with our challenges, struggles, weaknesses, pains. You know pain. You don't just know pain. You know my pain. You know our pain. You know the hairs on our head, the words we think. You know the hurts in our hearts. God, I pray today that the things that need to land would land in every person that's heard this, that the courage that needs to be given would be given for steps that need to be taken, that the comfort that can be found would be found. Because you are the God of hope and comfort. And God, that we would be people who would process our pains in such a way that they wouldn't just lead to our growth, but that they would lead to your glory. God, thank you that you say the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, which means when we're in pain, you run to us. I pray that it would be true that when we're in pain, we run to you. In Jesus' name, amen.